And welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practically Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to engage in effective partnerships. In this series of the podcast, we are exploring different people, support networks, and organisations who are able to provide a circle of support for you as parents as you navigate your way through the school journey with your child or children. You will learn from a diverse range of people how they can support you to guide your children to reach their fullest potential as a unique and whole person. Today, I'm introducing you to Baldwin, who is an entrepreneur and is founder of Kalibrate Consulting. Kyan is an education strategist for students in high school, working with families of students from Year 7 to Year 12 who want to unlock their child's highest academic and future potential. She creates personalised education roadmaps based on each child's unique learning profile, so they're optimised to achieve the results they seek for furthering their education and career prospects. In her spare time, she's an avid crazy cake builder and compassion therapy dog trainer. I really hope you feel inspired and supported as you hear from Kyan about how to support your child as they move through secondary school. So I'd like to welcome Kyan to the podcast today. I'd like to officially introduce you to the Creating Connections podcast. I guess you and I connected through LinkedIn, which is, an amazing platform where I've met so many different people and people who are passionate about supporting children in education. And so you and I connected, I guess, through our common interest in supporting not just students, but also parents and helping them understand how to actually guide and support their children through their learning journey. And of course, you're specialising in secondary school students. And it's amazing actually to meet you because a lot of people ask me if I work with secondary as well, secondary school parents. And it seems that there's not a lot of people out there who are really focused on supporting secondary students. So it's really important that I share your story with parents so that we can provide that circle of support. Because we know, as a parent myself, I know the secondary school journey is quite different to the primary school journey.
Very
And it is kind of challenging for parents because we don't really understand what the children are learning or how to support them, or if we observe that they're struggling at school, that we don't really know where to go to. So perhaps you could start by sharing a little bit of history about your working life and how you sort of moved into the education space and why you are so focused on teenagers and supporting them, particularly in the later years, the senior years of schooling, where the pressure's on and it's, I guess, the pressure's piled on students, but it is, I suppose, a time where you've got to make some very adult decisions when they're still quite young, but what your focus is to support them through those last 2 or 3 years of schooling so that then they can actually move into their the career space that they want to move into. So to start with, just a bit of background about you and where you started yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So where to start? I'm a bit of a storyteller. So for me, the journey actually starts back when I was in high school. So I really wanted to be a lawyer for whatever reason. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but I managed to get into law with some support and got my way through law school, and I was ambitious. I was always a high achiever, and I was like, I want to have a couple of different law degrees in a couple of different jurisdictions and be one of a few that could do that. I was set up to be a barrister. I wanted to be in court. I wanted to do my thing. Of course, life intervened, and I got really, really sick. It was a very unusual condition, and I won't bore you with the details, but essentially meant that I had to cut part of my law degree short, and I had to decide what the way forward was. And it was actually a blessing in disguise when I sort of look back, because what I started out doing in order to pay for my medical bills, and I wasn't well supported at the time, I was completely on my own. I had to find a way to earn money much faster than I could get in your average job. And so what I started doing was I actually started tutoring law. And I started off tutoring the students younger than me, but then I realized I was able to tutor students older than me, or had been, further progressed in their law degree. And so I started doing that, and I met all these different students along the way. And in particular, I noticed in the first years, you'd get this immense dropout rate. And this wasn't, localized to any particular university. I noticed there was a high dropout rate, particularly of students that were getting in with a 99 point whatever. It was a UAI back then, and they weren't able to continue. And we sort of investigated what was happening, and it turns out these students didn't know what to do with their ATAR. They're like, oh, I've got the ATAR, I should use it. What's the highest ATAR? Wasn't really representative of their passions. They didn't understand what the ATAR actually was, that it's not a mark of how hard something is, or how well they've done, or their knowledge. It's not a mark at all. They were just like, I've got this thing, I should use it. What's the highest thing that I can do? And so we had a conversation there, but we also started doing a lot more work, going like, okay, if that's the case, why can't we start the conversation earlier? Why can't we make better choices that we actually are happy with? Why are we unhappy with our choices and having to change courses and having setbacks and creating self-doubt? So I started talking to 11 and 12 students and did quite a bit of tutoring there, and I built a reputation as a HSC specialist here in New South Wales. And I was the go-to person for anything strategic, anything about managing your child's course load across their subjects, study-wise, time management-wise, all of those kind of things that were not just content-specific. I've spent a lot of time with students talking about how do you prepare your notes, how do you learn, how do you perform well in exams, rather than just this is what Macbeth says, in the play and all the Shakespearean context that they actually already get in the classroom. So that wasn't really the issue. So out of all of that, that's really where I found my passion. Went like, oh, I really like this because I can actually change the future of other people. Like, knowing what I know now, I would have made my decisions differently. And so that became really, really cool. I actually did end up finishing my law degree, and I've graduated with first class honours as well, in a double degree. So my background's in law and counterterrorism, actually. And I had some really, really supportive educators at the university level that enabled me to succeed. They didn't change the bar. They didn't give me any concessions, but they changed the way that they supported me. And that was the same in high school as well. And that was very much, started out as a pay it forward kind of thing, where I really wanted to implement that model with the teenagers that I was working with as well, to be like, well, if we change, the goalpost and the end post and the bar doesn't change, but how can we support someone better so they're more effective with the resources that they do have, whether it's time or intellect or whatever. And so that's actually where it went. And I had a decision to make whether I would pursue my law degree or not. I actually did end up practicing in-house for a while. I'm a admitted solicitor as well. But I actually ultimately decided I enjoyed running companies and businesses so much that I went back to it, created my first company, and did that for a number of years, and decided to step away from it. Tried to send everyone to my competitors, didn't actually work. People kept coming back, but I did shelve it for a little while. So I spent a while in advisory. I've actually got quite a bit of background in business advisory and strategy, and I was like, well, it's not happening in the education space, and so decided to bring that in, and it really grew a lot. The need in the community, especially when COVID hit, there was a lot of isolation, there was a lot of learning gaps. And so that's what my team and I do. We really help parents. We support parents in terms of, there's the traditional schooling, and that's fantastic in so many ways, but there are students that are going to need something a little additional, and that's okay. And there's so many different providers. We are very much about helping parents who understand that it's not enough to just send your kids to a good school and hope for the best after 13 years of schooling, that there might be supplementary support to help them reach the academic best. So I guess in a long-winded way, I'm someone that is a high achiever, that knows what it takes to perform at that top level, but has also been absolutely decimated by some of the circumstances of life. Have not come from a wealthy background. I actually come from a very poor migrant background, and have seen everything along the way, and I've learned the efficiencies and the most effective strategies to chart your career, to build a life for yourself. Some of it using traditional means, like getting into law and all that kind of thing, and using your ATAR, but also applying it to your passions. And so really what I specialize in now at Kalibrate Consulting is unlocking human potential. Kalibrate Ed specializes in secondary students, as Rachel's just mentioned, and that's what my team does there. But my whole brand is about unlocking human potential wherever it is, in organizations, in families, in classrooms and schools, advised for a number of universities and things like that as well. It's about how we're going to grow what I call human or social capital in a way that's ethical and sustainable, but also doesn't disable the future generation as well. So that's quite a long spiel, but that's fairly, I guess, a fairly comprehensive journey map of where I was and how I've come today.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and I guess what you're focused on with developing human potential. It's just, do you think that our culture in Australia is not really focused enough on our potential as not just as humans, but as students as well, in terms of the way that children are educated, and the way that the curriculum is, and the way that traditionally we've been educated? Do you think that there are challenges around our culture in actually encouraging human potential and students and their potential as well? I've just been sort of exploring I suppose, the controversial at standard on reports and that sort of thing, where children who are high achievers like you were and still are, and children who want to actually do really well at school and work really hard to get good marks and to try and get into the university courses that they want to get into. They're really sort of pushing themselves beyond, what they potentially thought they're capable of, but then not necessarily seeing the results that they want in their reports. Do you think that needs to change? And is that part of the work that you do in encouraging them to show, I guess, to reach that potential and to show them that they do have that potential?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that it's not so much that we do it better or worse than another culture or another region. It's that our focus is a little bit different. The lens that we use to define or to articulate even in common media, the measures of success, if you will, are just different than they are to other cultures. And that's going to emphasize certain priorities over others. And I think that's really what we're looking at. How does one actually measure? What is the yardstick for academic potential? And that's a question that I talk to a lot of families about. Like, what do you actually want your child? Who do you want your child to become? It's not just the what. Are they going to be an astronaut? Are they going to be an accountant? Are they going to be a dentist? But actually, what are they going to contribute? All those kind of things. And there's the soft intangibles, like I want them to be a good citizen, I want them to be a good person. But then there's also the what are they actually going to intellectually contribute? And I think that's a really interesting one. If you're a parent listening in, there's a lot of concern around devices, around digital devices. And when people ask me, what do I do with kids and teenagers and technology? Like, I know I can't just ban them, but like they're getting really distracted and that's going to hurt their future. I think it's really about that intentionality and understanding, well, what will they then be able to contribute, but what are they then limited in as well? So coming back to your question though, I do think that there, and I think coming from a legal background as well as a so I was born overseas, the lens that I see is that in the legal sphere, there's often a lag between society and legal change. And sometimes it takes a catalyst to sort of catch up. And I think the education space is very similar to that as well. And that should come as no surprise to most people. I think what the education system would benefit from is a more proactive approach where we're not waiting for things to happen and responding, but we're actually ahead of the curve and planning for that. And I think that's something we don't really do. In terms of what I've seen from different cultures, which is your initial question, I do see that the Western culture values a certain package. I mean, it's actually quite a hedonistic package, and it's quite homogenous, despite the language that we use about individuality and independence is actually quite individualistic. And we see in some of the Asian communities that there's certainly a lot of homogeneity there as well, but their focus is a little bit different, particularly when you also look at the literature and the research and where it's balanced around neurodiversity as well. I think it's a really interesting consideration to look at, well, is there overrepresentation in male, female, in various cultures? And that is simply not reflected in the Australian education system. For a culture or a society that is so mixed and diverse, we don't actually have that reflected. in the way that we teach. A lot of the structures that we're using were designed in the 18th century for an industrial age, not for a knowledge age, like we're already in and if not entering. And so I think when it comes down to are we preparing our kids for the best potential, I think we really need to shift this focus. And I'm really big on this in Kalibrate Ed. Our whole team is about shifting it from can you do this job or this industry to shifting it to a focus of internal capability, because no one can ever take that away from you. Doesn't matter if industry changes, jobs will come and go. If you're always inherently capable and you can problem solve, you'll be fine no matter what. But if you're dependent on that job will be there when I get there, then you're really, it feels like you're externalizing that responsibility, but also you're leaving a lot up to chance. It's a lot less control or influence, if you want to use it in those terms. I think it's always better to have internal agency and capability to drive any individual, not just young people, but certainly young people who are moving into an increasingly uncertain future.
Yeah. And what are you seeing are the main challenges that teenagers are actually having at the moment? You mentioned screen time and, the distraction of social media and, everything that sort of comes with that seeking of those dopamine hits, and students, I guess, challenged around what they are going to be focusing on or what they can focus on. What are you seeing are the main challenges that you're addressing in your business at the moment?
Yeah, so our organisation is quite focused on really reaching where the students are. So we're very, very student centric. We don't sort of look at what they should be. We're like, well, where are you at right now and who do you want to be? And how do you want to achieve it? Because there's so many different paths, right? So some of the biggest challenges that we're definitely seeing is the oversaturation of information, of peer pressure, of expectations. And a lot of them, especially with developing teenage minds, they actually aren't able to differentiate between something that's real and fake. A really blatant example is, you scroll on Instagram, you see all these beautiful Instagram models or beautiful products out there. A lot of girls are just consuming that. And I'm speaking in broad terms here, but girls are generally attracted to some of those more materialistic elements, the more visual, pretty elements, but they're not able to differentiate to go, that's Photoshop, that's not actually real, that's an unrealistic expectation. And similarly, there'll be things in gaming or conquest that we're seeing with the teenage boys. But what I'm really getting at is that because there's so much more information, the expectation rises, but we haven't given our children the guidelines or the structure to build in a healthy way. It's kind of like getting a tomato plant to just, it's untrellised, it's not structured, it's not supported, so it's not going to be really reaching for its potential and growing the way that it could. So I think that that's a real challenge, because with more digital technology, and we've seen this in the law school space as well, back in the day when a lot of the law was in books, the exams expected X amount because we knew that you could only read so much. Then now with electronic databases and all that kind of thing, it's evolved again. And now with AI and God knows what, like it's all happening. We shouldn't be afraid of it, but we've got to understand that with every evolution, it's going to take a bit of lag time to catch up. I think high school education in general is much the same. Our teenagers are the same. There's so many more people telling you, or voices telling you you should look like this, you should think like that. You're not allowed to say that. But how do we give our kids a way to actually discern, measure what's good and what's bad? And the dopamine thing for teenagers is it's inherently wired. Like, it is part of the developmental process. So how do we actually plan for that? And that's what we do. We partner with a lot of allied health professionals, a lot of specialists, to sort of be like, well, if we know that there's a certain neurochemistry that's just going to happen, and developmentally that's how it is, it's called puberty for a reason, how can we then tailor learning to not just that, but if they've got ADHD, a medication or a side effect as well? We see a lot of young girls affected by their medication, their hormones, their periods, all sorts of things. These actually need to be a part of the education strategy, not just, all right, well, you're feeling a bit unwell. And it's a conversation to carry into the workplace too. I've spoken to a couple of female leaders, helping to bring those conversations into the workplace to go, well, it's okay to acknowledge you're not feeling well because you've got a biochemical response. You shouldn't need to invalidate it. It needs to be done professionally and not to make other people uncomfortable, but it does need to be supported. And I think it's even more important for women that are moving into that space of becoming mothers, so that they can be present for their children as well. So I think there's lots of challenges.
Yes, we do. And I guess being a change maker yourself, you're trying to explore those topics. And interesting that you mentioned that my daughter's in Germany at the moment, and she shared with me some guidelines of the workplace, and they actually allow their female workers to have the day off if they're suffering from period pain. And that's, I guess in Europe, they're quite advanced in those sorts of areas, I guess, in terms of equality in the workplace and recognizing that, yeah, we are humans and that we do have health issues sometimes and that we, need to be supported. But in terms of, education, interesting that you mentioned that around education and factoring in the ways that teenagers normally behave, and that they are going through massive changes hormonally, and they have so much pressure on them to make, decisions that they're not really ready for. Are you seeing any change in education around that, or are you still seeing that there's a lot of, or there needs to be more support for students to be, particularly in those last 3 years of schooling, to be guided a bit more towards their career and set up for success? And I guess reflecting back on your own choice of career to go into law, and then seeing how many students sort of drop out because they realize they've chosen the wrong profession. And we're seeing that all the time. We're seeing so many people dropping out in the first 12 months of their courses. Do you feel that that needs to shift in schools in terms of the way that they're guiding students towards whatever they want to actually achieve?
Yeah, I do definitely think that there needs to be change, and probably not in the typical ways that you think. Like there needs to be more support. There could always be more support, but I think it's actually the messaging again, coming back to needing to guide these teenagers, in their formative years. Like, how is a 15-year-old supposed to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their life? I didn't know. I just, as you heard from my story, I quite organically ended up where I am today, and I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. But I'm perfectly okay with that. But that would cause a lot of people quite a lot of anxiety, I imagine. So I guess what I'm getting at is things that we could be doing would be helping our kids understand, well, what is actually the value of XYZ degree? What is the point of going to uni? And I think that starts with really changing the narrative, the understanding of what a uni degree means. This is going to sound incredibly controversial for a lot of people, but there's an over reliance on bonus ATAR points or early entry schemes. Especially by the private schools, and the vast majority of our clients are from independent private schools. But we see this overemphasis in that, or overemphasis on scaling and this and that, but we don't actually look at the fact that the whole point of getting an ATAR or seeking university is to do further study. So if you're looking for concessions, you're downplaying it. Like, is your child really being properly prepared for universities? And, I've heard remarks going like, they should really lower the ATAR, all that kind of thing. And look, like there is a standard that universities have. They want the best candidates. And I think it's about preparing kids to understand that it is a competition. We shouldn't be protecting them from that because it is actually a reality. Now, I'm not saying, and I'll be really clear about it, I'm not saying that your ATAR defines you, but I do see some shonky messaging sometimes about, oh, your marks don't matter. School doesn't matter. And then they're surprised simultaneously when young people like, oh, well, I don't need to study then, because that's what they've heard. But then you're like, oh, why are you not studying? Why are you not motivated? All that kind of thing. Why are you not, putting in the work to work consistently? Well, you just told me school doesn't matter. So I think that there needs to be this rehousing or this reconceptualization of what does it really mean to get a uni degree? If you're going to be going through, and I put it this way to our students, you're going to be going through your HSC or your IB or your VCE. You're going to get to that point, and then you're going to go into more further study, and it's going to be like doing 2 VCEs per semester per year, and you have to be prepared for that, and you have to understand that your marks and your transcript will go with you. And we spend a lot of time working with university students as well, but I think we need to, as a community, not just educators, and this is where I think a lot of us put too much expectation on schools, but we need to not just nurture. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, another educator down in Victoria. You can't just nurture, get to year 11 and 12 and suddenly crack the whip and expect them to get there. And it's the same thing with university. You can't suddenly peel off all of the cotton wool and just expect them if we haven't been enabling the skills throughout. So I do definitely think there needs to be a reconceptualization of the conversation. They're probably my points, and they're not going to be agreeable to everyone. But as a professional in the industry, looking, vertically through, primary school all the way through to university, but also speaking, with policymakers and things like that, I do think we need to start shifting. Otherwise, we're going to see that our candidates and our workforce is not going to be suitable for where Australia needs to be competitive as a nation either. So there's broader economic considerations, I think, than just the near term.
Yeah. And so how would you explain the types of skills that you're sharing with students that they actually do need to be able to manage themselves when they go into university? And how are you supporting parents to understand their role in supporting them at home as well?
Yeah, I think with the students, like my team spends a lot of time talking with them about, well, what do you know? What do you know that you don't know? And what do you not know that you don't know? Like sometimes, you talk to your young person and you're like, okay, how can you help? What do you think you need help in? They're like, I don't really know. And they're being genuine. And this is the thing, like they're being genuine. And I think it's the same thing with parents. And I think there's a real opportunity there for a really, really open dialogue to be like, well, what do we not know together? And what are the ways that we can resolve that? So I actually think the asking questions and being curious and being vulnerable as to the what don't I know, I need to be open to the idea that there might be something beyond my contemplation that I might need, that could be helpful. I'm not saying it will be or it's the only thing, but allowing yourself, not going, here's the list of skills and traits that you must have to be successful. And I was recently giving a lecture at one of Australia's major universities on employability skills. And I was saying that it's not a checklist that we're really looking for. We're looking for different things like resilience. We're looking for things like the ability to stand up for your ideas, not just your moral and your social compass, but also, are you confident enough in your ability, in your knowledge to actually recommend this path? And I think that's what a lot of employers are looking for as well. But I think, yeah, in terms of the skills, there's obviously your time management, the ability to regulate yourself, all of those kind of things. But I think if I was to look at a thread, it's the ability for a person to go, that's what I want, and I've got the skill and equipping to get myself there. I don't yet have all of that. If I don't know the answer, I know someone who does. If I can't do that yet, I know how to get there. I think that's the missing gap, rather than a prescribed list, a prescriptive text list, almost like the HSC English text list of this is what you should do, and that's going to give you a good English foundation. I think it should be, these are the types of skills that will get you whatever you need when you get to that point.
Yeah, so being resourceful and really, I guess it's those, I call them essential skills, not soft skills, as they're commonly known. But I guess the ability to think outside the box, be creative, seek the information that you need, and I guess become self-aware and self-led as a person and as a learner. So in terms of the ways that parents can support their kids, say, for example, if they've got a child in year 10, year 11, or year 12, what sort of support do parents need to be providing so that they can actually reach their, I guess, learning potential, but also their potential as a person? I know that with my own children, there is such a hands-off approach when it comes to their education, their academic education, and mostly all I'm doing and all I have done with my children is to check in and I guess coach them through different things that they're going through and really just being there for them when they need support. But in terms of academic support, I feel like, yeah, very separated from that. And with a lack of knowledge, a lot of parents have a lack of knowledge of what's actually happening at school and what's required of them for studying and all that sort of thing. So unless you're a proactive parent who asks those questions, it's very easy to just let it slip and slide and not really know how to support them. So how do you suggest that parents do that?
Yeah, look, I think even for the most proactive parents, there can still be challenges, like inherent challenges. You don't have visibility over what's going on in the classroom. You don't have visibility over, your child's digital learning space or even just the digital personal space. So I think visibility is definitely a challenge. But at the end of the day, what we sort of really work hard on with students and parents is designing some sort of a strategic approach. You need to know where you're heading. And it goes to your point before about checking in. Having a strategy makes it really easy to check in and go, are all stakeholders in there? I'm using very, sort of corporate language here, but when you think about it on scale, it shouldn't just be parents and child and that's it on this journey. It actually is much more effective when you have what we call a Kalibrate, a guiding coalition, to be able to support you through it. What that means is that you've got less single point of failure. If you're the only person that's going to monitor your child's device use or their study habits, and all the other influences around them are dragging them in different directions, it's not coherent, it's not consistent. And so that's really going to be a big challenge as well. So I think that strategic approach really just, it aligns so many other things. It takes the tactical approach that you get at schools and with tutors as well, who are very, very good with the knowledge and the information. That's what they're really good for, in terms of making sure they've got the information to put on the exam paper. But what about the skills about how do I process the information? What's the question really asking? When I've got 6 assignments, how do I weigh them all up? How do I make big life decisions? I think they all come back down to, or they're a lot easier to answer, we find, if there's a strategic approach, because everything that doesn't align with the strategy goes out the window. Everything that goes towards the strategy, that's where you put your effort, your time, your resources, your money, whatever it is. And it makes it much easier. It eliminates decision-making fatigue, and that is a real thing. We see students overwhelmed all the time, paralyzed, because there's so many different options. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I start here or there? And it translates to parents as well. And sometimes parents inadvertently add more options to their kids' plate as well. So just imagine you're at a food court or something, and you're a bit hangry, and there's all these food vendors. They all smell great, and you can't make a decision. And then your parents are like, oh, there's another food court level up there as well. And you're just hangry and you just want to be helped. That's how some students are experiencing, some of these questions being thrown at them. I know a lot of kids being asked, like, what do you want to do in life? And that's a really scary question. So I think in terms of how students can be supported, I think having a strategy is going to help. And then it really does help define or prioritize where are the key areas. Is it motivation? Is it time management? Are they distracted? Are there other learning challenges like dyslexia to help with? But I also think it's going to provide a really good framework to support parents, because a lot of these students are not ready or cognizant yet enough to lead themselves. They can be, but we have to shift that ownership. But if parents are feeling overwhelmed, they've got their own lives. And most parents I know are the busy people I know, balancing this and that, soccer mums, dropping people everywhere. They are empty themselves in energy. And so I think having a way to simplify it for the whole family, and a lot of families I know, there's multiple kids, and so you multiply that as well. So I think for parents, it's really important to be supported. If you're not supported, then your child's level of support they're going to receive from you is also going to be proportionately lower. So I do think it's a interfeeding system as well. And in all the work that I've seen, the families that have a strategy, they have a cohesive approach. There's minimal energy loss. But the ones that are kind of just, I describe it as a hope for the best strategy that just put their kids through school and they just take things as they come. Oh, there's an assignment. It wastes a lot of energy, and they don't get to capitalize on the efficiencies.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the way that you describe it as a whole family approach, how do you actually, if I was a parent coming to you and I have a child in year 11, for real, at the moment, and he's a very good learner, but his ambitions, he's still unsure what he wants to do. He's sort of got a bit of an idea, but he's not that motivated or ambitious to really be that interested in exploring what his future looks like. He's just cruising along and passing and thinking that he's all fine, which he probably is. And as a parent, you kind of think, oh, am I doing enough to support? How could I get him to be a bit more motivated and interested in his own future? How do you support parents who have a child like that, who's not really that fussed about anything really and just thinks he's going to cruise into life, and he'll probably be fine because he has got good life skills and he's very intelligent and capable, But how do you actually motivate a student like that in that position to be a little bit more ambitious and a bit more, I guess, taking ownership of their future?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of the ownership when you think about the traditional path of parenting, a lot of the ownership, from an infant, sits completely with you as a parent to help regulate your child's world, feed them, keep them warm, keep them comfortable, and gradually you shift. But we forget to shift other items. We keep holding on to some of them, and that means that that young person isn't able to really to make those decisions themselves. They don't feel empowered because you're still holding on to the lead. And so I think sometimes the first step is actually being able to recognize what those are. And sometimes that's most easily done externally, maybe with a family therapist or whomever. It could just be, a peer support group. But I think understanding where those elements are. When it comes to teenagers, though, for them specifically, I look a lot at things, as you've probably noticed, as a holistic system. So, if we think of things in terms of if there's a drain, if there's something that's a blockage that's making things harder, yeah, motivation is definitely going to go down. But also looking for things to amplify and boost. So we want to really be playing up those things that are going to make it more likely. So, for example, we work with a lot of families where we create an energizing force or an energizing momentum. One saves a lot of the lost energy. So, for example, when you see see students, they're sort of working and they want to come to a complete stop, and then they start again. That is not a sustainable, energy system. But if you had waves and they had a nice cadence to them, and there's nothing wrong with ups and downs, that is a natural rhythm of life. But knowing where they are proactively really, really helps. The other thing that we do a lot of work with parents and students on is definitely not treating motivation as a feeling. Motivation is not a feeling. It is not an emotion. I know we use it that way in language. I'm not feeling motivated today. I just don't feel motivated to do that. But it's actually, and you can choose to treat it that way. But a better way to get on top of that is actually to treat it as a system, as I described. There's different elements to it, certainly as activators, as inhibitors, that kind of thing. But the other thing is also understanding that that's going to be tied to a unique learning profile, that every student's going to have different toggles between different kids. That's going to look very different as well. But also helping your young person coming back to it's not a feeling. Building motivation as a process is really important. So yes, the systems thinking, but how do you help your child broach something that they have to do, but they don't want to do? And let's face it, we all have that in life, whether it's chores or mowing the lawn or doing your end of year taxes. There's stuff that we're not that excited about, say, compared to a holiday or something like that. So building motivation to do something is separate to how I feel, because the consequences of only making it an emotion or a feeling is that your child's work productivity or their momentum is going to be entirely dependent on how they feel. Now, that's especially problematic for adolescents because we know that their hormones, their bodies, their physiology, it's all changing and it's up and down all the time. Even if there were no external sort of stimuli, that would still be happening. And so what we need to do is build a process that's robust enough to actually weather those and give them the momentum, but also is flexible enough to be, to be tailored or coded. What is the term that we use? Coded to their unique learning profile, but also to their specific environment, medications, other things like that. The students that do have that in place, they're energized because they can literally see that if they don't use this structured plan, or they're moving away from their goal, they're making their life harder, they're more incentivized to use it and indirectly penalized for not using it. And so the natural choice is just do the thing. And so momentum and energy conservation becomes a lot more effective, a lot more efficient. And so then you don't have to spend so much time topping your child up either. It becomes a natural, sustainable ecosystem. So, I think that motivation should be a system. I don't think I don't think it's an emotion. I think we can certainly use that languaging. But I think if you actually want to improve your child's academic results or help them move towards a set goal or decide what they want to do in the future, you've got to really understand motivation as a process properly, so they have a nice anchoring North Star for when there's lots of people going, oh, you should do this or this, that, or my mates are doing this. I think it's good to have that anchoring North Star, and that comes back to the strategic approach as well.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It's like creating new habits that just become part of their daily routine, and then that becomes the motivating factor in itself. And you really are setting up your children for, I guess, failure in some ways by seeing it as a feeling. Because, I mean, once you're in the workforce, you can say, oh, I don't feel like working today. I'm not motivated to work today, but you have to go to work. So how many well-being days are you going to have off? I mean, it's important. Your well-being is important, but you also need to have that sort of programming and structure to be able to function as an adult, to be able to push yourself further to reach your potential, and be motivated
Absolutely.
as part of your routine and
Absolutely.
being in those
And
habits.
sorry to jump in here, but I think you make a really good point. I've been talking a lot about productivity and efficiency and effectiveness, but the well-being component is so important, and it's actually built into the motivation thing. You can't be motivated if you're in a bad mind space. And if you can somehow do it, it's still going to burn through the energy and the momentum that you have. So it's just not conducive. And, in terms of unlocking potential, a lot of, I see a lot of students working really, really hard actually. And sometimes less is more. Maybe they're focusing on the wrong thing. Maybe the area that they're focusing actually isn't even in the exam. I see that pretty often as well. But I know from working with high achievers, and we're talking about the 99.8 above, that sometimes less is more. Helping them actually maintain the system. So there's one student that comes to mind in particular, and she got into her law course, and aggressive ATAR, but when she started, she was studying for hours on end. She had multiple tutors. She was exhausted. And we had to actually teach her to trust that she was doing the right thing. She had a plan. And she did the work properly. There was no need to put in the number of hours that she was. And we actually started doing timesheets and helping her understand that. And what was really interesting for her, and we gave her the data to go with it, was that she did less work in terms of less hours. Her marks actually moved up because she was better rested. Her stress levels were down, but we kept her in the sweet spot of stress, because some stress is important for motivation. She was able to go to 18th birthday parties. She had a boyfriend through trials, and she still achieved a great result. So I think it's really about like that balance and understanding how does your child work as well, and supporting them. So motivation is going to look different there, but also the well-being requirements of each child are going to look different, just like they would be for you and me.
Yeah. I love that personalized approach that you have, and that holistic approach, and really just looking at the person and seeing them as a unique individual and who they are and who they want to be, or who they are now, is really important, I think, because we often focus a lot on who you're going to be, or
Yeah.
what are you going to do, like you said at the start, in your future. But it's really about who they are now, and how you can work with them around their personality, their current habits, their well-being needs, their family needs, and all of those different factors that you consider. I think it's a fantastic approach. So how can people get in touch with you to connect with your services, and how can parents, I guess, connect with you offline once this interview's out there and in the open? And what sort of services or other services do you want to share with us that you provide as well?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe what we do is really just if if there's an area in your child's learning or development that you think that there could be something to improve, or you're not sure what to do about it, please get in touch. You can definitely get in touch via our website. Rachel can pop that below for you. We run a whole series of events throughout the year that are free for the community, and they're quite topical. So, we often do planning in the beginning of the year, how to set your strategy for the year, around exam times or HSC trials or VCE trials. We'll do another series that's more focused on exam mindset, and how to maximize performance. Start of term, we quite often look at, well, how do you make a plan and stick to it? Actually, less emphasis on the plan and more emphasis on the how do you actually make sure that it's executed. And we empower parents to actually go, well, how do we have that conversation with kids? Because it is really, really challenging. Have sort of sat in that space where you can be saying all of the right things as a parent, but you're the wrong person for your young person to hear it from. And there's nothing you can do to change it. Someone else could say it word for word. Their uncle, a mentor, someone else, their footy coach, would go down just fine. But there is there is a barrier there. So what I would encourage parents to do is actually to engage with the resources we've got in the community that are of no cost to you, so that you can educate and support yourself to better articulate what you need as well. So that, we have events all the time. If you hop onto our website, which is at www.kalibrate with a K, KALIBRATE-ed.com.au, /events, and we've got loads of resources as well. Check them out, and feel free to come along. A lot of them are very interactive as well, where you get to ask questions, because we actually want you to walk away with answers. We want you to go home with answers so you can go and implement in your home space as well. But of course, if you need some more personalized support or in a private space, we often do consults for families as well, just to help them get on the right track, and it can be as quick as 15 minutes, and we're more than happy to help.
Sounds good. Well, yes, I'll put your link down below this video, and it's been very interesting to hear more about what you do. And I'd like to thank you for being on our Circle of Support series to support parents. And hopefully you will hear from a few parents that watch this video. And I look forward to working with you as well in the future to support parents. And thanks for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me, Rachel. Really, really appreciate the work that you do as well, in just supporting and creating that circle. I like to think of it as less of a cohesive circle. It's almost like one of those life rings that have like patterns. There's a white chunk and a red chunk, and I think that together we're actually going to get all that. And I think that's important for parents as well. That's not just for the support network, but parents to parents. Make sure you have a really supportive network that encloses you, that in your time of need, you've got someone to call. It doesn't just fall on you. Particularly at the moment, we're in a winter cycle, which can be quite isolating and lonely. So make sure that you guys are looking after yourselves.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed this episode from our Circle of Support series of the podcast. If you would like further information about how to be in contact with our guest from today, please click on the links below. If you are a parent who is struggling with any of the issues we've raised in this episode, I invite you to book a call with me by clicking on the link below or scanning the QR code on the screen, so you can share with me what challenges you're experiencing, and I can share how I may be able to support you as you guide your child or children through their learning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our Creating Connections podcast to continue to learn from myself and our guests how you can best support your child as they navigate their learning. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on the next episode in our Circle of Support series.